3 weeks later, Karen had transformed disaster into opportunity with the ruthless efficiency of a military strategist. Her dining room table was covered with aerial photographs, violation notices, and a detailed map of Willowbrook Estates, marked with colored pins, representing various infractions. "Margaret, look at this," Karen said, adjusting her reading glasses as she pointed to a photograph taken from her spinning deck. "The Hendersons have been hiding a chicken coop behind their garden shed for months. And the Patels. That's not a decorative water feature, it's an unlicensed hot tub." Margaret Chen shifted uncomfortably in her chair. As HOA treasurer, she'd watched Karen's enforcement tactics grow increasingly aggressive over the past year, but this felt different. Darker. "Karen, I'm not sure we should be using your deck for surveillance. Some of these photos, they're taken through people's windows. Surveillance." Karen's laugh was sharp and brittle. "This is compliance monitoring, Margaret. It's our duty as elected officials to ensure community standards are maintained. Do you want property values to plummet because people think they can hide violations?" The truth was, Karen had become obsessed. Every evening, she positioned herself on the deck with binoculars, a camera, and a notepad, cataloging every possible violation. As her home slowly rotated, she discovered that the Johnsons were running a small pottery business from their garage, that the Yamadas had installed solar panels without architectural committee approval, and that at least 6 families were exceeding the community's strict pet limits. But her real focus remained on Jake Morrison. "I've been watching him for 3 weeks, Karen continued, sliding a thick folder across the table. "He's been having friends over every Tuesday night for what he calls D and D group. But I count at least 8 cars. That's a clear violation of the residential parking ordinance." Margaret flipped through the folder, her frown deepening. "Karen, these are photos of Jake reading on his porch, Jake watering his garden, Jake taking his trash out. This is beginning to look like harassment. It's documentation." Karen snapped. "And yesterday, I caught him red-handed. He was installing some kind of device in his backyard shed. Probably a ham radio setup, which would violate the telecommunications equipment restriction." What Karen didn't mention was that she'd spent the previous evening perched on her deck until well past midnight, watching Jake work by lamplight. She'd felt a strange thrill as her deck rotated, giving her brief glimpses of his project before spinning away, building anticipation for the next rotation. The doorbell rang, interrupting her presentation. Karen opened the door to find Jake Morrison standing on her porch, holding a manila envelope and wearing an expression she'd never seen before, serious, almost sad. "Hello, Karen." "Margaret." He nodded to both women. "I need to speak with you both about something important. If this is about the violation notices I've been filing, you can take it up with the architectural committee," Karen said, her voice icy. Jake shook his head. "It's not about the notices, Karen. It's about this." He handed her the envelope. "I've been documenting your surveillance activities. Photos, times, dates. I've also been in contact with several neighbors who've noticed the intensity of your interest in their private lives." Karen's face went pale as she opened the envelope. Inside were photographs of her on the deck, telephoto shots clearly showing her with binoculars and camera, all time-stamped and dated. "I'm filing a formal complaint with the HOA board," Jake continued. "And if this behavior continues, I'll be contacting the police about stalking and harassment charges." "You can't do this." Karen sputtered. "I'm the HOA president. I have every right to spy on your neighbors, to take pictures through their windows." Jake's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. "Karen, you've crossed a line. And that device you've been so curious about, it's a security camera system. I've been recording everything." Margaret stood up slowly. "Karen, I think we need to call an emergency HOA meeting. This has gone too far." As Jake walked away, Karen clutched the envelope with shaking hands. Her perfect surveillance system had become a trap, and she was caught in the middle of it. But as she watched Jake's retreating figure, a new plan began forming in her mind. One that would either save her position or destroy everything she'd built. Karen looked up at her house, where the deck sat motionless for the first time in months. "Now I'm afraid I've lost something more important than control. I've lost the chance to actually know my neighbors." Jake was quiet for a long moment. Karen, what if I told you that's not true? What if I told you that every Tuesday night, there's an empty chair at our D&D table, and we've been hoping someone new might want to learn the game? Karen stared at him, not daring to hope, even after everything I've done. Especially after everything you've done. Takes a lot of courage to change direction mid-spin. As Karen walked home alone, she realized that for the first time in months, she was looking forward to staying still. But in the back of her mind, she wondered if Jake's invitation was genuine, or if this was just another rotation in a game she didn't yet understand how to play. The next Tuesday would tell her everything she needed to know. The emergency HOA meeting was held in the community center, with nearly every resident of Willowbrook Estates in attendance. Karen sat at the head table, her usual confident demeanor replaced by the tight-lipped determination of someone fighting for their political life. Ladies and gentlemen, began board member Robert Silver, we're here to address serious allegations of harassment and privacy violations against our HOA president, Karen Whitmore. Karen rose from her chair, her prepared speech crumpling in her sweaty palm. Before anyone says anything, I want you all to know that everything I've done has been in service of this community. Yes, I've been monitoring compliance from my deck, but only because I care about maintaining our property values and... You photographed my teenage daughter sunbathing in our backyard, interrupted Lisa Henderson, standing up from the audience. She's 17, Karen. 17. A murmur of outrage rippled through the crowd. Karen's face went white. That wasn't intentional. The deck rotates automatically. I can't control what. But you can control whether you take pictures, said Dr. Patel, rising from his seat. And you can control whether you report a medical hot tub that helps my wife's arthritis as an unlicensed recreational facility. Jake Morrison stood up from the back of the room. Karen, I want to ask you something directly. In all your months of surveillance, did you ever once consider that your neighbors might be human beings with legitimate needs and privacy rights? Karen looked around the room at faces that had once nodded approvingly at her enforcement initiatives. Now they looked at her with disappointment, anger, and something worse, pity. I was protecting the community, she said weakly. From what? Asked Margaret Chen, who had remained silent until now. From the Johnsons making pottery to pay for their daughter's college tuition. From the Yamadas trying to reduce their carbon footprint? From Jake hosting a weekly game night for friends who've been meeting for 5 years? The room fell silent. Karen felt the weight of every gaze, every judgment, every friendship she'd sacrificed in her pursuit of perfect control. You want to know what I learned from watching all of you? Karen's voice cracked. But she continued. I learned that the Hendersons have been secretly caring for rescue chickens because their daughter has autism and animals calm her. I learned that the Patel's hot tub isn't a luxury, it's medical equipment. I learned that Jake's D&D group includes 3 neighbors who've been struggling with depression since the pandemic. She paused, tears threatening to spill. I learned that every single violation I've been documenting represents someone trying to live their life, care for their family, or find a little happiness. And I learned that I've been so focused on being right that I forgot how to be a neighbor. The room remained silent. Karen looked directly at Jake. The device you installed, it wasn't just security cameras, was it? Jake shook his head slowly. Motion sensors and automatic lights. Mrs. Chen has been afraid to take her evening walks since she was mugged downtown last month. I've been installing them around the neighborhood for free, for anyone who wants them. Karen closed her eyes. I could have just asked. Any of you. Instead of spying, I could have just asked. Yes, said Lisa Henderson softly. You could have. Karen took a deep breath. I'm resigning as HOA president, effective immediately. Margaret, I'm recommending you for the position. She looked around the room one final time. I'm also having the deck rotation timer disconnected. Some views are too tempting to resist. As the meeting broke up, Karen found herself alone with Jake in the parking lot. The late evening sun cast long shadows between them. Jake, I owe you an apology that's bigger than anything I can say here. Karen, can I ask you something? What were you so afraid of? Karen considered the question, really considered it. I was afraid that if I wasn't watching, If I wasn't controlling everything, the neighborhood would fall apart. That I'd lose the only thing that made me feel important. And now, Karen Whitmore's champagne flute shattered against the spinning deck rail as Willowbrook Estates' most exclusive home performed its nightly rotation. 23 of her closest HOA allies screamed in unison as the meticulously arranged appetizer table slid toward the edge, sending her famous spinach artichoke dip flying into the manicured azaleas below. Waity die hill is happening, Karen shrieked, her perfectly coiffed blonde bob whipping around as the deck slowly turned, revealing a panoramic view she'd never bothered to appreciate during her 14 months of relentless HOA enforcement. Margaret Chen, treasurer of the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association, clung to the deck railing like a barnacle. Karen, I think your deck is moving. That's impossible. Karen snapped, even as her $300 patio furniture began its lazy migration toward the far corner. I've lived here for over a year. Decks don't just. The deck completed its first full rotation with a soft mechanical hum, and Karen's face went white as she spotted her next-door neighbor, Jake Morrison, standing in his backyard with his arms crossed and a massive grin splitting his bearded face. Evening, Karen, Jake called out, raising a beer in mock salute. Hope you're enjoying the view. Karen's mind raced. Jake Morrison, the very man she'd been trying to evict for 10 months, due to his excessive garden gnome collection and non-conforming mailbox car, the man who'd been nothing but polite in the face of her constant complaints, HOA violations, and passive-aggressive notes about his lawn height. You, she screeched, pointing an accusatory finger that trembled with rage. You did this. You sabotaged my deck. Jake's laugh echoed across the neighborhood. Sabotaged? Karen, that's not sabotage. That's a feature. The previous owner installed it as a rotating observation deck. Didn't your realtor mention it? Or maybe you were too busy planning your HOA takeover to read the property disclosure. The truth hit Karen like a physical blow. In her rush to acquire the neighborhood's most prestigious address, purely for the strategic advantage it would give her in HOA politics, she'd never bothered with a proper inspection. She'd been so focused on the house's position at the center of the community, perfect for surveillance and enforcement, that she'd signed papers without reading them. Turn it off, she demanded, her voice cracking as another guest tumbled into the slowly rotating hot tub. Can't do that, Karen, Jake replied, his voice carrying easily across the spinning distance. The timer's locked in your basement utility room. But hey, at least you'll get to see everyone's backyard violations from up there. Isn't that what you live for? Karen's face cycled through colors like a mood ring as the deck continued its rotation. Her guests were either screaming, laughing, or drunkenly trying to keep pace with the moving furniture. But all Karen could focus on was the smug satisfaction in Jake's eyes and the dawning realization that she'd been living above a mechanical marvel she'd never known existed. The deck had completed 3 full rotations by the time Karen found her voice again. This isn't over, Morrison, she shouted as the deck spun her away from him once more. I'll have you know I'm documenting every single violation I can see from up here. But even as she said it, Karen was already calculating. The deck gave her an unprecedented view of every backyard in the neighborhood. Maybe, just maybe, she could turn this humiliation into her greatest enforcement opportunity yet.